For our COBT listeners and viewers, it's Maynard and Mike here with a gift, something that we are so excited about. Steve Hilton is joining us. You probably know Steve is one of two of the final contestants to be governor of California. And we've been watching this race because California is such a fascinating place. It has so much potential, so much tech, so much beauty, but it also has a lot of energy, power, business, climate, et cetera, policies that shall we say, Steve, are debatable. And so it's so exciting to see, Steve, you taking the message to the voters about how they should think about all these things. It's an open debate, the spirit of democracy. But let me stop talking and just say we're delighted to have you and can't wait to talk about what's happening in California.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
So, Mike, tell us what is going on in the world. Obviously, pretty turbulent, exciting news filled times these days.
Yeah, Maynard, it appears we finally have a potential peace deal, and I say appears, ending this 15-week war with Iran. An MOE is expected to be signed this Friday in Switzerland with the Strait of Hormuz potentially fully reopening. So that's a net positive. That's pushed crude oil prices down. But make no mistake, signing this MOU is going to be the easy part. Keeping the peace and living up to the commitments of the deal, that's going to be the difficult part. And so we're going to see where that leads us here in the next couple of weeks and months. Now, from an oil standpoint, the deal pushed WTI price down about $4 on Monday and $4 today. And so WTI is trading now at $77 per barrel. And that's the lowest closing price since week one of the war. We'll kind of repeat what we said during the last week's COBT, mainly that oil strategists are now contemplating what, oil markets will look after the Iran war, meaning the number of oil tankers leaving and more importantly, the number of tankers entering the Strait of Hormuz and how quickly OPEC production ramps given all the shut-ins and dialed in, and the oils that have been dialed back. Bottom line, oil traders seem to be thinking, seem to be taking a short-term bearish view and are less concerned with the intermediate view, which I kind of think looks pretty constructive. So something to think about. On the energy equity front, as you might have expected, energy equities didn't react too kindly to what happened with oil pricing. And so energy is down about 4% this week. It's the worst performing sector. Two things we note. First, the energy sector has totally ground tripped, and it's actually down about 2% since the war began. Second, the 12-month strip is trading at roughly $73 a barrel, or $10 a barrel higher since the Iran war began, which is a good thing. So back to what we said earlier, energy investors are now asking how long it will take OPEC production to fully recover, how long it will take to refill global SPRs, because we suspect they're going to refill these global SPRs pretty aggressively, and how long it will take the market to get back into balance. We think it'll take longer than most people expected, which is why we're more focused on the back end of the oil curve and why we're kind of constructive energy equities. Now, what's pretty unbelievable to me is that energy as a percent of the S&P 500 is now at 3%. Prior to the war, it was 3.5%. And it peaked at 4.2% in late March. So even after the Strait got closed, even after prices going up significantly for all commodities, the energy weighting in the S&P 500 has actually declined, which to us is sort of utter madness. On the bond market front, we're going to also say that 10-year bond yield moved marginally lower this week on this peak deal and now trades at 4.45%. But the interesting thing is bonds this week are going to trade on what's going to happen at the FOMC meeting, which is going to be occurring tomorrow, Wednesday. Most people are going to be looking at the dot plot, which kind of, shows what which way the Fed is leaning towards. I think most people think they might be leaning higher, so we'll see what happens there. And this will also be Kevin Warsh's first press conference as Fed chairman. So bond traders will be tuned into his style and policy path he lays out for the rest of 2026. Now, from a broader equity market front, the S&P 500, like what they heard on the Iranian peace front, which pushed the S&P 500 this week up around 1%. And pushed it to 1% within its all-time highs. That's the good news. The bad news is that the leaders in the recent run-up have been big tech and chip stocks, and they really pulled back today. So market leadership might be changed, so we have to keep a close eye on it. The last thing we'll say is, is last week was all about the SpaceX IPO. It was up 20% on day one of trading, and it's up around 45% from its IPO price. So in fact, SpaceX's market cap is around 2.6 trillion today, making it the fifth largest publicly traded company globally, just barely trailing Microsoft. So those are the key happenings in the market. We're looking forward to talking to Steve about some of the stats from not only the electricity side, gasoline side, and home prices. So we'll get into that later in this conversation.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's jump in.
I want to say thank you so much for inviting me here and to join you the other day, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Very much in a state with less insanity when it comes to energy policy. How about that?
Well,
very polite of you to use the word debatable. I'd pick a different word to describe California's energy policies. Insane. How about,
okay.
totally
That might be
insane.
our tagline, for this discussion.
Well,
Steve,
we made a video just at in the last few days of the primary called "Stop the Insanity," which I think is a pretty good summary of what needs to happen in California. To explain that a little bit, I think the real starting point for me is this is not just insanity has in some abstract sense, it's cruelty as well, because the consequences of it are being most viciously felt by those who can least afford it, working class Californians, small business owners who are being absolutely crushed by high energy costs. And the two dimensions of that are gas prices, which of course we all know, and it's widely reported, the highest in the country by a long way. Even of course, we got the spike from the Iran war, but in California, $2 at least a gallon higher for gas than anywhere else in the country right now. And I see the complaint. Californians look at what's these prices for gas around the country that are causing absolute outcry and outrage. $3.50 for gas, and we look at that and think, wow, that would be heaven compared to what we've had to put up with. And so you've got the gas prices, and remember who that hurts. It's working class Californians who drive their cars or their trucks hours a day for work. That's who's really suffering as a result of that, not the climate warriors in Marin County tapping away at their MacBooks, working from home. Second is the electricity prices. With gas prices, we have the highest in the country, even higher than Hawaii in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, which is obviously insane given that we have abundant oil reserves here in California. For electricity, we have the second highest anywhere apart from Hawaii, more than double the national average. They've doubled in the last 10 years, and that's entirely because, and both of those things, which of course are foundational in terms of the cost of everything else, energy costs feed into everything. It's why we have the highest grocery bills. It's actually why we have the highest house. Everything is so expensive because of this. It's the underlying driver of everything else, entirely as a result of a misplaced extremist ideology on climate that isn't even delivering its own objectives. That's why insanity is the right word. It's not as if this is some trade-off. We're getting this environmental benefit in exchange for this cost on families and businesses. No, there's no benefit. It's having zero impact on the climate or on global temperatures. It's all for show. In fact, you could argue that it's increasing carbon emissions because as a result of these policies, for example, we're now importing most of the oil that we use, even though we have abundant reserves here, in the name of climate, which of course increases carbon emissions. So it makes absolutely no sense, but in the process, it's really hurting those who can least afford it. And that's why I'm so determined to end this.
So you have the highest gasoline prices in the country. And I think the volume of gasoline that's consumed in California is maybe the second highest state. So it's not like you guys only use a little. So there's really high gasoline prices. There's really high electricity prices. The effect on the climate is debatable. It's
nil. No, let's be honest. It's nil.
Okay, so it's okay. And industry is hurt by this, and jobs are hurt by this. When you stand up and give that in a town hall, do you find that the average voter is piecing that all together, saying, we've got to change these things? Like, is it resonating, or does it sound, complicated and,
Well, I start with the benefit to people of electing me as governor. It was actually the first policy announcement that I made in my campaign last year, which was very simple: $3 gas. Now, of course, there's a whole reform plan behind that, how do you get to $3 gas? And you can have a specific set of, changes that you can point to that are in my plans. But that simple pledge of $3 gas is our single most popular policy. And people say, well, how are you going to do that when it's at 6 or 7 right now? Well, the thing I always point out is that prior to the Iran war, there were 40 states in America where gas was $3 or below. Most of them don't have any oil reserves. So this is not some outlandish, promise here. This is just normal in most of the country. And that's what I want us to get back to.
Do you think people do understand it as a unique to California problem? Like if I'm a California, like it's something we're doing. Do you think
I think it's one of the things that I feel has been, I'm hearing this from other people, is that actually the way that I've been making these arguments and holding these ridiculous policies to account over the past year on this and many other issues is actually truly shifting people's understanding, because there wasn't really anyone out there challenging this stuff before. And so I think that the answer to your question is it's changing. We are actually explaining this and more people are aware. I wouldn't say a majority, but I think that we are absolutely putting together a picture of why this doesn't make any sense and why we need to change.
And do you think this is another impression I have is, California did in the 70s and 80s, let's say, it led the nation in doing environmentally conscious things. Okay. But it seems like it just kept going and it went too far. Like, for instance, I think the gasoline that California demanded we have in the 70s that would clean up the smog, I think that's basically the specs that the rest of the nation now has. So if California just switched back, if it just switched to the specs of the rest of the country, it could lower costs and it could keep the environmental benefits that it fought for way back in.
Yeah.
Is that how you think about it?
I think that's right, but I just always want to make sure that we when we go down this road, start by recognizing that the current policy is not actually environmental. It's fake environmental. It's not actually reducing. It's not carbon emissions. In fact, you could say it's increasing carbon emissions. So I want to. It's very important we establish that frame for this, which is that this is not an environmental policy. It is a virtue signaling policy that actually doesn't deliver what its stated objectives are. Now, you're right that California has a long and proud tradition of environmental protection, which I strongly support. And I would say I'm an environmentalist, always have been. And one of the great things about our state that we love, Californians feel proud of, is our connection to the natural world. And we have the most magnificent natural beauty, the incredible range of landscapes we have in California, all our state parks, all our beautiful national parks, more than anywhere else. It's just an incredible heritage, natural heritage that we cherish. And so I 100% support that. In fact, my argument in this campaign is that we can even enhance our environment in ways that actually meet climate goals more effectively without hurting people in the process. For example, I've put forward a plan for tree planting and conservation of habitats like wetlands that would actually do more to reduce carbon emissions than what we've got going on at the moment without actually crushing people with high costs. So I've set out a goal and we've got a whole plan. I've got the guy who's going to be running the program for me when I'm governor to plant 3 billion trees, which sounds like a lot, but in the middle of the last century, around the Second World War, FDR, the program there was 10 billion trees across America. So this is again something that's achievable and would, in fact, if you care about these things, help us reach the California government's 2045 net zero target, which to me is a ridiculous and arbitrary bureaucratic target anyway. But whatever, let's just give them that. You can get there better through planting trees without hurting people and businesses in the process.
Here's a question for you, Steve. It's a hard one. People around the country, so many people, they either lived in California once or they have visited California or they just love California for whatever reason. So for those of us outside of California watching all this, who just look at it and go, wow, this is the Silicon Valley, Hollywood, Napa, freedom. This is the state. What role do we play? I mean, do you talk to people outside of California? Are they expressing support for you? Are they hoping you can win? Or what's that dialogue like?
Well, it's wonderful to see. There's a lot of energy and excitement around that, because I think that on different levels, first of all, there's a lot of people who've left California and businesses who've left California who'd love to come back.
A lot
if
of
we had
them
a bit of sanity.
A lot of them are in Texas.
I know.
Yeah.
I've met and Florida, I had breakfast the other week with Governor DeSantis, with Ron DeSantis. We had great conversation. And I said, well, don't get used to it, Ron. Enjoy it while it lasts. When I'm governor, all those people are going to be coming back and you'll lose the tax revenue.
Can you get people fired up in California, almost like, hey, this is our state, this is our place, this is our team. We haven't been doing well. Let's unite together. And
that's a really lovely way of thinking. It's a lovely way of, I probably could do that more. It's a lovely way of thinking about it. Thank you. And I think that but there's something that I feel very deeply, which is that California, no offense to any other states, but it's just not like any other state. And there's a phrase that I used in my book last year, Califalia, Reversing the Ruin of America's Worst Run State. And I say it all the time, which is this: California means to America what America means to the world. And what I mean by that is that, for me at least, and I think many other people share this, California represents the very best of America, all the qualities that we love about America and that we particularly think of in this 250th anniversary year. California really represents that: entrepreneurialism and innovation and energy and ambition and optimism and the can-do spirit and a kind of rebel spirit, actually, which is like, we don't have to do it that way. We're going to do our own thing. That's why we've created all these incredible industries that have had such world-changing effects, whether that's Hollywood, whether that's Silicon Valley, whether that's biotech and life sciences down near San Diego, whether it's our world-leading
ag industry today where JPL was presenting, all this space, rocket, etc. technology. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I was at a defense contractor in Orange County today. Incredible innovation there. Just everywhere you look, we've got that spirit within us, and that's why I actually think this turnaround could be much quicker than people think if we get a governor who understands that spirit of California and just wants to get the government out of the way without all this ridiculous, endless nanny state, bureaucratic, bloated government bossing everyone around from morning till night, telling you how to live, how to run your business, how to raise your kids, what kind of house to live in, what kind of car to drive, how to cook your food, just endless, telling us what to do. While, by the way, they don't do their job properly. They charge us higher and higher taxes for worst results. They can't make the roads work. We have the worst roads in the country. They can't produce schools that teach kids properly. They can't keep the streets clean and safe. So they can't do their job, but they're very happy spending all our money telling us how to do our jobs. And we're done with it, frankly. I remember I did a meeting, it was the Hillsdale College supporters a month or so ago in Orange County. They had a big meeting and they put me on the program there and they gave me an hour. And the title on the program was Steve Hilton, California, Diagnosis and Prescription. And I stood up and I said, look, you've given me an hour. It's very kind of you. I don't need an hour. I can tell you very simply. California, diagnosis, too much government. Prescription, less government. And I know that sounds like a very straightforward, old-fashioned, conservative thing. But I would also say it's just basic common sense that if you just stop all this endless bloat bureaucracy and the taxes that have to be charged in order to pay for it, then the genius and the spirit of California will shine through and we'll be firing on all cylinders once again.
Hey, Steve, you talked a little bit about gasoline prices just a little earlier. I just want to throw some stats on gasoline, electricity prices, and home prices. First off, regular unleaded gasoline prices in California is $5.90 a gallon versus a U.S. average of $4.30 a gallon. So $1.60 a gallon for premium today. 5 years ago, that was $1 a gallon, and 10 years ago was 65 cents a gallon. So up 30 and 100% respectively. Also, California median home sales price is roughly $915,000 versus U.S. average of $430,000. So a difference of $485,000. 5 years ago, that difference was $450,000. 10 years ago, the difference was $270,000. So quite the change. Now, the last thing we really want to talk about is electricity prices. And, the average residential retail electricity price is around 33.5 cents per kilowatt hour, or the second highest in the U.S., only behind Hawaii at 42 cents. 5 years ago, the residential retail price was 23 cents per kilowatt hour, and 10 years ago was 18 cents per kilowatt hour. So up 45 and 80 cents, 86% respectively. Bottom line, the difference today between the California residential retail price of electricity and the U.S. average is 15 cents per kW. So that's almost a double from the U.S. average. 5 years ago, the difference was 9 cents per kilowatt hour, and 10 years ago, the difference was 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So up 65% and 175% respectively. So the question we have you after setting all that up is, for most people, we talk to, it seems like voters vote based on the price at the pump. Where retail gasoline prices are, and clearly they're really high in California. But it seems to me like the shift is now happening to people getting, asking about, price at the plug. We've been talking about this for the last 12 months. Price at the plug, electricity prices seems to be a big deal right now for voters across the country, and I would assume in California as well. So maybe talk about what, electricity prices, where they're at, and how that's going to affect voters' mindset into this election.
It is. And I was talking about it last year because one of the advantages of running this campaign the way I have, which is to be out on the road. At the beginning of the campaign, people said to me, "Oh, you don't want to be, it's California, it's too big, you can't do retail politics. Basically, make your announcement in some boring hotel room, and then you stay at home phoning people for money." I said, that doesn't make sense to me. I don't want to do it that way. I want to campaign, and I want to meet people. I want to be out there fighting. And so we've been on the road for a year, and we've done hundreds of events, and we have these town halls, and people come along, and it's open to everyone, and you learn what concerns people. It's a very, very direct way of understanding what people are experiencing, because you start to see a pattern in the questions, and many of the policies that we've put forward have emerged from those conversations. Gas prices was not that. That was something that I instinctively knew, and that was right at the beginning. My plan to cut income tax, to remove people from state income tax, I've revised that plan just today, actually, as we're taping this. Your first 150 grand, no state income tax. But the electric bills was something that came from these town halls. And I heard it over and over again. People saying, "What are you going to do about electric bill, all over and over." And then, and it's crushing for people. It's really crushing for businesses, for a restaurant or small business owners, to basically can't pay. And so it's very, very important. I mean, we've got my backdrop there. I don't know if you can see. This is what we have in the town halls. This is our little mobile thing, and it's like my plan I call Cal Affordable. That's at the top. I don't think you can see that, but here it is. Cut electric bills in half. I mean, these are my plans. I mean, this isn't just for you, because we're having an energy conversation. This is my actual plan. These are the first 2 points. $3 gas, cut electric bills in half. That's the plan I've been taking on the road the last year. And of course, when people say, "Well, how are you going to do that?" I point out that our electric bills are more than double the national average. In other words, if we just did what other states do, just that, we don't even have to be better. Just do what the sort of normal average thing that other states in America do, then we would have prices that are in line with that, which is, in other words, roughly the national average, which would mean cutting your electric bills in half.
Steve, do people, sometimes you raise this stuff and people say, "Well, California is beautiful. Everybody wants to live here. Of course, the real estate's more expensive. Of course, everything's more expensive. This is just the cost of living in a beautiful state." But
it wasn't always the case. No, it wasn't always the case. I mean, back in the 50s and 60s, as you could say, yes, you're right. The population was half what it is now, but we had the most affordable housing in the country because we built in an expansive, ambitious way. We built the suburbs of Southern California, and that's where I am right now. And you look around Orange County, where there's nothing, and now we've got this magnificent, example of human creativity in building these amazing places that have generated so much wealth and opportunity. And the housing cost is just like with gas and electric. The reason that we have the highest housing costs, amongst other things, is the extremism on climate, because it's behind this ideology that they call density, that the only acceptable form of building homes is apartment buildings that are shoved into the current neighborhoods, because you can't build outwards because that's sprawl. So you can't have sprawl because people are going to drive their cars and that's bad for climate. Can't have sprawl. They call it sprawl. I call it the California dream. That's what people want in California. They want to live in a single family home so you can enjoy the weather and your kids can play outside and etc. And so that what they're trying to do is impose an ideological blueprint on people. And I've always hated that. I really cannot stand that. It goes right back to something very instinctive with me. My parents fled communism in Hungary. I grew up in a regular working class immigrant home in England. My whole, life, I've just hated. I mean, my, wife and sons would say, sometimes to an embarrassing degree, being sort of told what to do by ridiculous bureaucrats and pointless, regulation of any kind just drives me crazy. And this trying to impose your ideology on someone else, I really hate that. And that's what's gone wrong in California.
And your experience, you mentioned that your parents immigrated from Hungary to the UK. You grew up there. You're British American. You've become an American citizen. You worked at 10 Downing Street. It's a fascinating background. What do you think in particular, having worked in the British government, what did you take away from that is informing this election and how you would govern?
Well, I think that the number one challenge for the next governor, and that I'm planning on that being me, is to really rein in and cut back this bloated nanny state bureaucracy. That's the underlying driver of all these costs. Of course, there's as I've been pointing out even today, as I launched the updated version of our tax plan, your first 150 grand tax free. That is something that you can do directly. The simplest and quickest way of getting more money into people's pockets is for the government to take less out in the first place. That's pretty straightforward. But all these other things on, the cost of housing, bringing that down, electric, gas, school, all these, there's a multitude of problems. And the fact is that we are, sad to say, the worst performing state on nearly everything that matters. I mean, right now we have the highest poverty rate in the country, the highest unemployment rate, the highest cost of living by far. US News and World Report ranks California 50th out of 50 states for opportunity, and so on, right? So there's a lot of change that needs to be made. And most of that is going to involve really aggressively cutting back the bureaucracy. I tried to do that in the UK. Going back to your question, that's really what started. I really saw how hard it is to do that, and how focused and determined you have to be, and have the political will to make it happen. I took that lesson from that experience. I wasn't the decision maker then. I was an advisor, not the boss. Now I'm planning to be the boss, and I know exactly what needs to happen in order to make the changes we need in order to restore the California dream for everybody.
What do you hear, if anything, from the Terminator? Speaking of old bosses, is he supporting you, or what will that be?
Yeah, no, I know Arnold very well. I mean, we've been friends a long time. I've known him since those days, actually, probably 20 years now. Since we first met, and he was one of the first people I spoke to about this. I mean, he's got his own. He's hosting a conference in Austria, and I've seen some clips of that. Even he's he's really positioned himself as very much in the lead on climate change. I saw today, I really posted a clip of him saying it's insane that we're importing oil on these giant super tankers halfway around the world when we have abundant reserves right here in California. So, and that also he's the one that when I became a citizen in 2021, my team, I was then hosting a show on Fox News, and they put together some videos of people congratulating me, including Arnold, who very charmingly, he saw the video of me getting my citizenship and said, "Oh, but you had the wrong jacket. You got to have the right jacket." And he has famously a jacket which he then showed, and I have now had copied, which I don't know if you can see on the lining.
Nice.
There's the stars and stripes, and there's the California flag on the other side.
Nice.
And so that was all Arnold's instruction to get the right jacket. So I've certainly done that part. Hopefully I'll follow in his footsteps in a more substantive way as well.
When you launched this, Steve, it just I am no political expert here, but the Republican brand hasn't resonated in California for a while. Did you think about being an independent or a libertarian or somehow something other than a Republican just to cut down on the friction?
No, in the end, it's a two-party system, and there's very few examples, I think, of anyone succeeding outside of that. And so the point is, the brand is what you make it. And so I'm defining it in the ways that I've been in this race and will continue to do so. Common sense, positive, practical things to help your life, make our state Cal-affordable. That's it. It's not complicated. And I think that will it is resonating. That's why I think we've done as well as we have. And I'm very confident that we can go all the way because, the majority of Californians want change. That's the simple fact. A majority of Californians say that the state is on the wrong track. We need change. And as I've been saying since election night, I had a good feeling about it. So I preemptively put the words to be printed on the backdrop for election night. We had to decide that a week out, but I had a sense that we were going to be in a good position. And I put the words change is coming. And that's the theme for this stage of the campaign. Change is coming. I believe it is because we can't go on like this. And Californians, I think, are ready for something new and fresh and exciting.
Can I ask, is it, because now you are in the top two, California, we've all been watching and has this very unique process. Do you sense people saying, because this will happen to us. We say, have you seen Steve Hilton's campaign? There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of power. There's a lot of freedom. What a neat guy. And then someone will say, yeah, but how can that guy win in California? So is part of what you're trying to do to convince people that you've really got a shot? And
yes, exactly. That's exactly right. And we do, because there's a logic to elections. I've noticed it doesn't always work, but there's a sense of what's the right result. And the right result here in California is change. The state is going in the wrong direction. They've had 16 years to show us that their ideas work. And the results are in. And it's a failure on every front. It's obvious that we need change. No one can dispute that. Even the Democrats don't dispute that. The trouble is, how can they possibly offer change? Their candidate, Becerra, is a living embodiment of more of the same. So I think that there's, when people say, how can he win? How can a Republican win? What I think, I don't always say this, but this is what I think, is with their record of total failure, how can a Democrat win?
The Silicon Valley crowd, that's a community that, particularly people in the business world are just very attuned to all the change. SpaceX just went public. There's so much happening. NVIDIA is the world's biggest company, market cap wise. Is that community supporting you, or do they find your policies interesting, or what would you say?
Yeah, some. It depends, but basically, yeah, we've made some great progress there. I've got some good relationships there. Some of the supporters, like Sergey Brin, have been public in that, and others haven't. And maybe they will be in the months ahead. But I'm very confident that we'll have for the first time in a long time, financially speaking, a level playing field with the unions, because the government unions have really been running everything in California and funding these Democrat campaigns. And so I think that's one of the reasons that Republicans haven't done well, the absence of that kind of financing, because it's a big state, you need a lot of money to compete here. And I think we're going to have it.
Hey, Steve, I find your basically grasp of the issues and the solutions, pretty intoxicating, to be quite honest, because these aren't complex issues. They're fairly simple solutions. And you've been able to communicate that in a very simple layman term. So I can appreciate that. I guess my question would be, knowing that as Governor Steve Hilton, what does the first 100 days look like in your government?
Well, we're going to, we're going to be sending a tax bill and a budget to the legislature on day one, which will reduce spending because they've doubled spending in the last 10 years and everything's worse. Clearly, we have to reduce spending so we can reduce taxes. We'll be making very aggressive changes in the bureaucracy on day one. And that takes time, obviously, to work its way through. The governor has hundreds of appointments, thousands of appointments to hundreds of different agencies. A lot of the disastrous policies that we're talking about are actually implemented through the agencies of the executive branch. And so we need to make changes there. I think it's a really, it's not one thing. It's a systematic redrawing of the boundaries of the state and the government in California and replacing ideologues in our government with pragmatists who just want to solve problems.
How many people work for the state of California, Steve? Do you know the number?
Well, directly, it's about 200,000. I mean, there's different ways of measuring it. So, and it's there's one measure that's over 300,000. I mean, there's just, and whatever it is, it's a lot higher than it used to be, and it needs to be a lot lower.
And I'm curious, everybody, the LA mayor's race that got a lot of attention. The San Francisco mayor gets attention because he seems to have done some good things to kind of get the city, back a little bit in the right direction. How do you see working with the mayors in the state?
Well, I'd want to have a cooperative and constructive relationship with everybody. It's a very important partnership. But, we're also going to not tolerate a lack of action. You're right that San Francisco is better, but it's not good. LA is nowhere on that journey. Many other cities that are less well known. I mean, I don't know, you go and towns, I travel California probably more than anyone. And you see these problems everywhere, not just the big cities. And so we're going to have some very serious conversations with the leaders up and down the state because we just can't go on in this way.
No, look, it's been fascinating. We want to stay in touch and we want to see these energy policy, these power, all this stuff is really important to not just California, but the whole nation. So we're excited to see your campaign progress.
Well, thank you very much. And, I love the idea that there's a lot of people out there rooting for California. And I think we can pull it off. It's going to be, look, I don't think it's going to be easy, but it's not impossible. And so we owe it to the people of this state and the whole country to really go for it. And that's what I'm doing.
I'll tell you a funny story. When you're in Texas, you think California's crazy, but when you're in California, it's beautiful. You think Texas is crazy. Maybe we need a Texas, California, summit to figure all this stuff out.
Exactly. Well, it's great to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Good luck with the election. Appreciate you joining us.